Tesla filed something recently in Austin that I don't think people are fully clocking at. Because Tesla's not just adding buildings, they're trying to build an entire environment around this thing. And the way they're describing it is honestly kind of wild. When you actually look at what they filed, it starts to feel like something much bigger than a factory expansion. They keep calling it ecological paradise, which sounds less like a manufacturing site and more like something you'd see in a resort brochure. And that's where this gets interesting because those two things usually don't go together at this scale. And yet, that's exactly the story they're telling right now in Texas. So, here's what we actually know. Tesla filed new site plans with Travis County that show a massive expansion of Giga Texas, including a North Campus build out and millions of additional square feet of development tied to the broader vision of what the site's becoming. And alongside that, they're still pushing this ecological paradise concept, which has technically been around since 2020, when Elon first described it as this place with trails and wildlife and river access and all these very nature focused elements. And on paper, honestly, it sounds kind of incredible. I mean, we're talking about miles of walking and biking trails and preserved green space and wetlands and wildlife corridors and trees planted every year and even things like sports fields and community areas layered into the site. It's being framed as something that tens of thousands of people around Austin could actually benefit from, not just the Tesla employees, but, the broader community. But here's where I want you to pause for a second with me because the idea is not new and that matters. Now, the ecological paradise has been talked about for almost 6 years now, and what's actually being built so far is still relatively small compared to that full vision. And more importantly, there's still no clear timeline for when any of it's supposed to be finished. And that gap between the scale of the promise and the pace of delivery is where this whole thing starts to feel less like a construction update and more like a strategy. Because if you zoom out, this isn't just about land use, it's about narrative. Tesla is taking something that is fundamentally industrial, one of the largest manufacturing sites in the entire country, in the world, honestly, and wrapping it in language that feels environmental and community driven and even aspirational. And that is not accidental. That's positioning. And it changes how people feel about what's being built before it's finished. And in a place like Austin, where growth is already a sensitive topic, that kind of framing matters a whole lot. And then there's another layer that people are not really talking about, which is how Tesla is actually operating here from a regulatory standpoint. So in 2024, Tesla used a Texas law to remove itself from the Austin's environmental oversight, which means a project like this is no longer held in the same city level water quality and development rules that would normally apply. And I'm not saying that automatically makes the ecological plans meaningless, but it does raise a very fair question, which is why present something as one of the largest public ecological projects in the region while also choosing a path that involves less local oversight? They don't got to play by the rules. Now, that tension is real and it's worth paying attention to. On top of all that, you have the actual expansion itself, because this is not a small add-on. Tesla is planning millions of square feet of new development, including what's being called the North Campus, tied to their Terafab concept, which is essentially a massive semiconductor manufacturing play that could eventually scale to a level we've never seen before from Tesla. And if that sounds ambitious, it's because it is. And Tesla doesn't have a long history in semiconductor fabrication. And they're talking about building one of the most advanced chip facilities in the entire world with timelines that depend on equipment that is already backlogged globally. So again, you have this pattern of extremely big vision paired with a level of execution risk that people tend to underestimate. So when you put all this together, what Tesla's building in Texas starts to look very different than how it's usually described. It's not just a factory expansion. It's not even just a campus. It's closer to a controlled ecosystem where manufacturing or research, where infrastructure, housing patterns, and now even recreation and environmental space are being shaped around a single company's footprint in Austin, especially on the east side. It's already reorganizing around it, whether people realize it or not. And this is what I think people get wrong when they talk about Tesla in Austin, because they either go all in on the hype or they dismiss it completely. And neither of those is accurate. The reality is a lot more complicated. Tesla is very good at building momentum and shaping perception at the same time. And this ecological paradise idea sits right in the middle of that. It might become something genuinely valuable for this city, or it might end up being partially delivered and mostly symbolic. But either way, it's doing its job right now because its job is influencing how this campaign is being perceived before it's real. So when you hear that Tesla is expanding in Texas, yes, that is true. But the more interesting story is how they're framing that expansion and what that means for the city around it. Because Austin is not just hosting a factory anymore. It's becoming a test case for what happens when a company tries to design both the physical space and the narrative around it at the same time. And that's really the part that people aren't clocking yet. Not just how big this gets, but how it quietly changes what it feels like to live next to it. By the way, I'm Amber Haley. I help high earning tech pros relocate to Austin. Don't forget to hit subscribe. I post new videos like this every single week. Let me know what you think in the comments. I can't wait to see you in Austin.